So my presentation today is on the effect of conflict and poverty on children, a case study of Uganda. I think at this point many of you will already know that conflict, poverty, and HIV/AIDS have a kind of a relationship, a symbiotic relationship. They all connect with each other. When people are in conflict situation, it's most likely that they're going to be displaced. Their economic lifeline is going to be interrupted. And that causes poverty. And when people are poor, most times it's very possible there's a likelihood of their moral standards to be eroded, and that gives room for irresponsible sexual activity, or sometimes vices of human, like young girls getting married early because the parents feel pressured to support a large family, or they're looking for the quickest way to get money, especially in cultures where there's bride price. Unfortunately, many cultures in Africa have this problem, so it becomes a girl-child problem. So conflict affects the girl-child somehow differently in a way. And we're going to be looking at this. My case study is going to target Uganda because I am from Uganda, and I have been a victim of one of the longest civil strife in Uganda, which is the longest insurgency, the LRA war in Uganda, fighting the government of Uganda, which started in 1986 until 2007 or 8. So the war was for more than 20 years, and it displaced more than 2 million people. And it's estimated, because the killing there was no systematic way of people losing lives, so there's only an estimate of how many lives could have been lost in this conflict, which is about 400,000. Many reports would support that statistics. And yes, it skyrocketed the prevalence of HIV/AIDS in northern Uganda for a while, and people lived in displacement. I remember in 2006, we had a report by a civil society organization working in Uganda, which indicated that about 1,000 children were dying every week from the appalling situation. They live in displacement camps called the IDP camp, which is kind of like a refugee camp, but it's the IDP because they're internally displaced. They didn't cross any border. That's the difference. So when you go to the Library of Congress website, and I know why sometimes I'm so interested in doing this is many times I have come across an experience that disappoints me because not so much materials are used in the American education system. So to teach about Africa. So many times when I talk to schools, as Jem has allowed me to do, where I bring the real world experience in Africa into the classroom. Sometimes I meet questions like, how do you get photos? Because we think there are no cameras in Africa. Mm-hmm. So the child is not exposed enough to understand what Africa is, what it looks like, what's going on there, because this is a topic that has not been given the due attention it deserves. So every time I get the chance to do this, I am really happy, and I'm glad that I'm talking to the right people, the people who change an innocent mind into a productive member of society, which is the children you're trying to educate, you're educating every day. And when you go to the Library of Congress, which I'm sure yesterday you already went through how to get there and look at the materials, and in this case I was looking at how to get to Africa through the Library of Congress database. And I wanted to look at the map so that I show my audience where Uganda is located. Many times when people travel from United States to any country in Africa, they stop at saying, I'm traveling to Africa. So there's a way people begin to believe that Africa is actually one country, which is not true. Africa is over 50 different countries, actually about 56, 57 different countries. So in my presentation, I find it necessary to look at which location we are talking about, because I think it will make sense. So that is the map of Africa, and Uganda is in the eastern part of Africa, and it's a member of the East African Community. In Uganda, I come from the northern part. I am a native Luo, which is one of the ethnic groups in Uganda out of the 40 different ethnic groups you find in Uganda. So the Luo people live in the northern part of the country. And it is this area that was affected by over 20 years of conflict and causing all different kinds of suffering. And for the most part, the gravest crimes during this conflict were committed against the children, because they became the victims of abduction, forceful recruitment, and cunning sabotage, where they were convinced using candy or cookies to be taken to captivity, where they worked as slaves. They provided human transportation for the rebels. And at the beginning, the government too had children in their military ranks. And so Uganda borders in the north Southern Sudan, which is one of the newest members of the United Nations. And to the east is Kenya, which many of you know because the President of the United States has some relationship with Kenya. And in the east we have one of the most unstable regions too, which is DRC Congo in the west. And in the south we have Rwanda. I think many of you would relate, when you say Rwanda, people think about the genocide immediately. So, not the best news coming from this region, but it's one of the most beautiful part of the world too, for those who are able to visit. So, I thought it's also important to try to understand what is really the facts about Africa. It's important to discuss the facts about Africa. Africa remains the poorest region in the world, and half of its 882 million people are trapped in a seemingly very, economic circumstance which will challenge the entire world for a long time. As you know, as a result of globalization, the world is so interconnected. What happens in Africa definitely affects people in the United States in different ways. I think it's right to say at this time, we thought Ebola broke out in Western Africa. And now people in the United States are worried because we've had a few casualties on the soil of the United States. That is how communication and technology has improved the world to create this small global village. And what happens, what used to be a problem you could only hear of, now in such a short time becomes a problem next door. Mm-hmm. And the Ebola case has just proven that, right? Mm-hmm. So there is no way we can still think of Africa and their situation as a distant problem. Mm-hmm. It actually will affect us in different ways, and I've seen firsthand many individual households and individuals in the United States making direct impact on the lives of vulnerable people in Africa in different ways through their generosity, time, and different kinds of resources. So that is going to be a problem that we will deal with for a long time. And United Nations data still continue to show that out of the 50 least developed countries in the world, 40 of these countries are in Africa. So we are really the custodians of poverty. We keep it safe. And I'm hoping that this situation changes. And most African countries have experienced conflict. And these conflicts have roots in our history, which is linked directly to colonization. Colonization came to Africa about the time when slavery was becoming unpopular. Many European countries, Western European countries, as a result of the Industrial Revolution, did not see the need in the foreseeable future for human masters in terms of slaves. So it would be better to pay more attention to sources of raw materials to feed the mushrooming industries, which you teachers all know. And for that reason, we ended up with the Berlin Conference, which led to all this colonization. The colonization did not prepare us for self-governance. That is why Africa today continues to suffer from different kinds of conflict, because people, the leadership finds it difficult to actually fully accept the principles of democracy. If people are supposed to be free, institutions are supposed to protect the dignity of people. The people in leadership cannot see that as possible, because that will interrupt their lives. Many African leaders are so used to depending on government checks that they cannot imagine their lives outside office. So most governments change hands not through the votes, but through the battle of the gun. A government is overthrown, and through all these processes, what happens is more guns are produced in different parts of the world and are shipped to Africa. And this small arms proliferation, as you see in different parts of Africa, say Somalia, Libya, Egypt, and all these other unstable governments, they fuel the conflict. They give the tools we need to sustain this conflict. And as a result, the children becomes the target for different reasons, which we're going to look at. And yes, this is a map of Uganda. Those are the different regions, and when you go on the Library of Congress, you'll find these. And I think yesterday you already talked about how to get these facts. So Uganda, interestingly, I've been here for 3 years now. This is my 4th year. And every month, I'm going to meet someone new in the United States, meet a new friend, one of my new friends who knows somebody who has been to Africa, to Uganda, or they themselves have been to Uganda. I found that very strange. Among other cultural, shocks that I'm dealing with is to find the number of people who have traveled from United States to Uganda. Sometimes it makes the country feel so close to United States, which I find pleasantly surprising. And this is a country, the name is a republic. It has about 34.5 million people. For a small country, that's a lot. And that's possibly also a cause of conflict, because with this population, that means resources become scarce. And when people struggle for resources, sometimes as simple as clean water, it becomes a problem. And of course, because technology doesn't serve people the same way as it does in the United States, the environment is their last resort. And that means this high population will deplete the forest, because that's what they use for cooking and warming. Well, Africa is hot, but in the morning you still need to warm yourself. I grew up as a child burning leaves in the morning before going to school to warm myself, because we didn't have sweaters and other warm clothes. And that cold is not cold by United States standards. When I came here, I realized a different level of cold, and I actually thought I would never make it to the next day. But yes, here, as I'm still here, I don't think if I go home I'll still need a sweater or anything. So yeah, this population, and our commercial city is Kampala, and all this, the official language is English. Every country colonized by another country will have the official language. They will speak the country, the language of the colonizers, because that's what the institutions were taught to do business in those different languages. So we were colonized by the British, so we speak English. And then our business language, as a member of the East African community, we speak Kiswahili, where many, with the true, real Kiswahili is in Zanzibar and Tanzania. Then the real good Kiswahili too, a bit diluted, is in Kenya. And then when it comes to Uganda, it falls sick. The language is not as pure and rich as it's supposed to be. and then it dies in Congo. There, they just speak very little, you know. If people from Kenya listen to Kiswahili in Congo, they probably might not understand anymore. So it fades, and that's a language that is a product of intermarriages between the slave traders, Arabs, who was trading in slaves in Zanzibar region, the slave market, and the local coastal tribes in Africa, in East Africa. Majority of the country are Christians, but we have a small population of Islam too. And interestingly, that's not because of conflict, you know, in Uganda. Why? Because there's a degree of tolerance, that people do certain things to show their acceptance of the different religion. And that gives nobody any reason to fight for religion. So we've not had that problem. And life expectancy in this country is 54 years. And all this information you'll find on the Library of Congress website when you look at it. Old and new information as they update all the time. The Ugandan flag is black, yellow, and red. The black, which shows the African Pan-Africanism. And the yellow is the plenty of the sunshine. The red is the brotherhood. That's the blood in every human being. And of course animals, but in this case we're talking about human beings. I had a scenario with a student in pre-K in the United States. We had a very interesting argument. Because when I explained the flag of Uganda, when I reached the red part, and I said this is to show human, you know, brotherhood. And because all the blood, humans have red blood, so that is what Uganda is representing in its national values. And then this young man said, well, no, I think that's not true, because blood is actually purple and then it only turns red when it interacts with oxygen. And that's what my dad told me. And I was so shocked because I was not prepared for a lesson in biology at this point. So we left it at that, and I thought, we need to do more research to find that out, more information about that. So that was quite interesting. And
how about the crane?
The crane, this is one of the most graceful, gentle bird you will ever meet. It is gentle in the way it does everything, and that's supposed to represent the values of Uganda. As you can see, the different colors of the flag are also on the crane. When you look at it's the crested crane, and it's on one foot, which is supposed to show that Uganda is moving forward. It's not standing still, it's moving. So as you can see, that is the crested crane, which became the emblem of the country.
Is that only located in Uganda? Because I've never seen a crane like that. Yeah. Is that?
I think
but
most
in the States,
it's African region. Yeah.
Okay. So
there should be in other places, but we had the most population of them. They're so gentle. They're so beautiful. They're so beautiful.
They look beautiful on the picture.
Yeah.
Must be
I
beautiful.
remember growing up, there were a lot of them. But with the war and trees being cut down, people destroying swamps and wetlands, their population has been greatly affected. Yeah. As an adult, I rarely see them now. Sometimes you see them and it's like Christmas, really, where it comes once in a year, and every time it does, it's special. Yeah. So that's some of the painful truth about the effect of the war. As a child, I was affected by the conflict, and one day in a normal evening, the rebels came through my village, and at home it was just me and my uncle, who had been in the military and retired. But at this point, the abduction of children, the rate had gone so high, so they needed more qualified people in the military to train these children who are being abducted every day. So my uncle was one of the targets. They decided that they wanted to take him, and he resisted. He didn't want to go, and then they started physically harming him, beating him, hurting him, and I was seeing as all this is happening. As a child, I cried. But I'm powerless. I tried to cover him, but they pulled me aside and continued to beat him. I noticed his bleeding in his ears and eyes and nose, and they started dragging him to go with them, and I kept crying, and then I had the commander say, he's old enough, we should take him too. And he was talking about me, and I was just 9 years old. So that evening was my first encounter as a direct victim of this conflict. We walked for a long time. As a child, I thought this is a really bad experience. I kept hoping this was a dream, but it's not. It was real. And we walked for about 5 miles, and then we branched off from the dirt road into the woods and kept walking in the woods until it got dark. And little did I know, in this place we were going to, we were supposed to meet with other units of the rebel groups who have gone in different operations. So there was this place they call the RV where they're all supposed to meet. And when these groups all started showing up, they all show up with a bunch of children, others tied together using locally made rope. Others are just undressed, stark naked, because that's the easiest way to identify prisoners. And they put all the kids together. I think my memory now is faint, and I couldn't count at that point because I was in a situation of panic and shock and all that. But I think we were more than 100 children in one camp, and we were all naked. And they made us sit in one place. Mosquitoes in Africa reproduce in the woods where we are. It was cold. Some days it rained. The only way to keep warm is to hold on to another child and hope that the body will generate heat. You can't even get a good sleep. And they beat you for no reason. There are people other children who already been indoctrinated into the system. Their work is to torture you. So they keep torturing us every day, and they say, when you are broken and you begin to grow in the ranks here, then you become like the people torturing. So you will do the torturing. So they want you to start preparing yourself mentally to become a child soldier and admire the action of being the one torturing other people. And it didn't stop there. You're also given sometimes another human being that you should take their lives. Luckily for me, I was still just 9, and it's not easy for a 9-year-old to maneuver an AK-47. It's a bit too heavy, and with ammunitions, and they don't want to take that risk for losing a gun. That's a very big risk for a rebel group. So our work was to carry luggages of loot and supplies. We were like the slaves that do the work, and when they want to cook, you're sent out with guards to collect firewood, and you come back and make fire and cook beans, whatever they have that needs to be cooked. And then once that is done, you need to move. It's done fast. Every time they find a supply, like a load of beans or sorghum or rice, they would fill a sack until it's the height of your knee, and they say anything from your kneecap downwards you can carry it. And we would do that. This produce are all way different, and it was the most torturous 6 months of my life. I remember waking up one morning, and we heard a girl actually yell, crying so much and wailing in the morning. And they heard us like animals to go to that location where this voice is coming from. And on reaching there, we found this girl tied to the ground, and they said she tried to escape, so we're making an example of her so that you know what will happen to us when we try to escape. And they kept, there was a boiling water pot, filled with boiling water, and they would just cook this water and pour onto her back. And she's naked. It's the sight that I can't shake off. Because seeing another human being who is not like crazy doing an inhuman act, you see somebody's skin blistering and peeling off and you still continue doing it, it's so traumatizing. But that was not even the worst. I witnessed other young people given sticks instead of the gun because they want to make it as painful as possible, and they ask them to beat a prisoner to death. And afterwards, I gained the courage to ask them, how does it feel? I was nervous. I saw myself like someday I'm going to be one of these guys who's going to be asked to do this. And I was so scared. And then they tell me, the first time, it's so bad, you will not sleep for many days. But when you do it the second time, it becomes normal. And I didn't know what that meant until later in my life. Then I realized that's when these young children have been turned from being normal children to beasts, because killing is no longer an issue. And after 6 months, I was able to successfully escape. I knew I always wanted to escape because every day a friend does not come back from battle. Those who come back, others have a very dangerous wounds, injuries from bullets, and some lose limbs from landmine, anti-personnel mines. Some of the most grim look of, sometimes for weeks, the camp just smells so bad because there are so many wounded people and no treatment. The only treatment is hot water and doesn't do much. And everybody is crying and being, they're trying to disinfect the wound, and it's just a mess. And yet you have to walk. Some of them whom they think will leave, it's the work of the children to carry them, on stretchers. And it was so torturous. And until when I escaped and came home, I met this woman who, because all schools as a result of the war was not functional, so children play, and because children are children, they play, their games only is made up of the things they know. So they play war games. We play war games, hiding, and when you come out, you pretend that you're shooting the other person. That's all we see. We didn't see it in videos. It's what we see every day and run away from. So our games, she didn't like. This woman was a refugee in the United States. She lived in Philadelphia, was a nun for years, and got her education as a teacher. And you know how teachers think. Teachers work like soldiers. When they see a problem, they want to solve it there and then with using whatever resource they can. And that was her thinking process. She just thought, these are children who are playing war games. How about if I engage them in writing numbers on the ground, on dirt? And that's what we did. She started teaching us how to write 1, 2, 3 on dirt. And this ended up becoming a school. As you can see, at this stage we were already in the British system. This is primary 5. I don't know which grade that would be in the United States. 5th grade?
5th, 6th.
Yeah, same thing, I think, 5th grade. And this is our classroom, a grass thatch house with no doors, no windows, and just a wall made of mud and some sticks. And yeah, she got help from very wonderful people from the United States. Now the school hall has about 1,300 destitute children, and academically is one of the best. I'm proud to have been one of the pioneers. It also helped me walk through my own problems of trauma and being afraid for not being accepted immediately, because when you come out of captivity as a child, you're afraid, people are afraid of you. They don't know what you've done. They think you're no longer the innocent child they knew, and it becomes difficult to reintegrate. It needs a supportive community like this school that knew us before, and it's something the community doesn't talk about. And so, yeah, that is how my journey through education started. And later in my life, I was running for a long time. School was my escape place. I knew when I'm in school, I have something to look up to, something to do. And I'm reminded by these teachers every day that when you do the right thing in this place, your future is going to be different. So I love to be in school because I was running away from my past. I didn't want to end up the way I have been. And yes, I think we've talked about this already, about Africa. And yes, this conflict, as I gave you the background, when you go on the Library of Congress website, you will find that United States took action in 2004, where they passed what they call the Northern Uganda Crisis Response Act. This Northern Uganda Crisis Response Act was sponsored by Senator Russell and with 8 other co-sponsors. And this was supposed to encourage the government to allocate resources to respond to this conflict, try to help people survive. It was for conflict management, and went ahead to support a joint military operation which became to be known as the Operation Iron Fist 1. There was 2 which failed and many others. And the government of the United States spent money to build capacity of people to settle conflict and sent actually supplies, like from cooking oil to rice and everything, and in so many other ways. But when you read this bill in the Library of Congress website, you find the details of what actually happened. So I've noticed when I go to school, sometimes before I arrive to speak, teachers a day before request their students to do their research and find out information so that they can generate the right questions to ask when I'm presenting. So this is a very useful material for students to go there. It'll open their minds to the issues we're going to talk about, and they don't feel shocked. They won't live in shock. And they're very good. They're in the digital generation. They're very good with computers. So the Library of Congress is a very good resource for this kind of experience. So yes, why children are primary victims of violence in Africa and many parts of the world, of course. I think we're just dealing with the Boko Haram issue in Nigeria, where they target girls and just took them. ISIS too, they do the same thing. They target children, first of all, because they know their primary purpose is to strike fear in the hearts of people, and every parent cares about their children. Because that's how we are brought up to be. You want to die before your children. So when they reverse that process, that they'll kill your children first, that strikes the real fear. It meets their objective. They take the children away from you. And everybody invests their children in their children. You send them to school, you're sending money and in health and everything, because you want them to be somebody. You want them to become contributors to the society. And when they take this away from you, it's like taking an investment away from society. It's very torturous. It's very scary. It's one other way of torturing communities and striking fear. And so many armed groups will do that to torture people, and also because children are soft targets. They don't defend themselves. An adult, what do? They can't fight. And for the worst part, they're also armed. And then children also are still trainable. They're easy to indoctrinate, so they will believe anything an adult tells them. So in my case, my home country, my people, the children were targeted because when you take a child away from their home state, they no longer understand the geographical definition of the area they go to. So there's very little chance that they will try to escape because they don't know their way back home. They can't find their way back home. They have only one option: to continue following their abductor. So that was the other reason. And for the most part, in war situations, some children would not be able to understand that actually when you kill a person, it's not like what they see in movies, where a few months later the same person is alive in another movie and will not die. So they think war is a movie. So it's easy to turn them into a killing squad because the concept of death is still blood to them. They don't understand it completely, how it feels to take somebody's life knowing that they will never come back. Because that part they don't understand, that they will never come back to life. So that makes children a target. And they also target children because for the most part, they grow. They grow stronger, they grow faster, and they make it's easy to season them into a very strong fighting force. And sometimes they're given false hope. They're easy, like false generosity, like cookies or candy, which are easily available, could become the worst tool that these groups use to lure children into becoming some of the worst human beings because of what they turn them into. And that makes children continue to be a target in every conflict situation. And there are many other reasons which are more complex. But what I find interesting about Library of Congress is sometimes people struggle. How did we find ourselves here? Like a situation where we now depend so much on social media, like where Rachel has just been talking about this and how now teachers can have a kind of social media in the Library of Congress website. And sometimes when I ask children, how do you think if the time Martin Luther was jailed in Birmingham, yeah. How would the world be different? Sometimes it's good to, test their imagination, because in the world they live in today, it's so different. I have seen, like, in 2012, young people in the United States coming up with solution to problems in Africa using the social media. When you read about the Kony 2012 campaign, in 6 days, using the social media, over 100 million people around the world watched a 29-minute video to raise awareness and encourage people to solve a problem in Africa, in northern Uganda. And people were so mad when they learned for the first time that this was going on and children are dying just because they were born in that part of the country. And many people came to help. Celebrities from Hollywood, congressmen and congresswomen and different politicians, including the president of the United States, made a remark. To me, that showed how powerful the social media has become. And it's a very powerful tool that young people use today. And unfortunately, the old people sometimes are left out because it's not really the technology of our time. But it plays a very crucial role, because what these young people did, not even the most wealthy corporate organization in the most developed country like United States has been able to achieve through paid commercial advertisement. You never get 100 million people to do that in 6 days, watch your commercial. So I feel this is really powerful. So is it possible for the kids to put this into context? When you ask them, if we had social media by the time we had the civil rights movement and different other kinds of struggle in the United States, how would that be? I think when young people understand the power of the social media, they would use it more responsibly. Mm-hmm. Because often they've also used it in very irresponsible ways. Mm-hmm. Like, I was listening to the radio, and somebody was talking about one girl who posted they call it what? Sexting. Sexting. Yes, sexting. And then this cop thought it's one case because by law, I've not read the piece of legislation, but I think when you do that, it's considered pornography and it's illegal. And this cop thought it's just one case. And when he started investigating, he found that there's a string of like hundreds of young people who are doing this. And to them, it's not new and it's not bad. And many also didn't know they were actually breaking the law. And then you don't have enough space in jail to take everyone to jail. So the only solution would be to help them understand the power of this new wonderful technology called the social media. So in Global Education Motivators, we have a topic that I also present on this particular problem. And many times in the Library of Congress, when I started researching about how was media, like working with people and how socialized media, what was the background, I came across this early documentary style, which was as by 1910, the Edison company, they were already making some videos and then they show people like that. And there's a ton of information about that. Unfortunately, this is not a good one, so you can't read it. But when you go on the Library of Congress website, you will see that. And this has become a very powerful tool, as I just discussed. As you can see, this is a picture that was taken in the second revolution in the Arab Spring. Because it started in Tunisia, then it came to Egypt and went to Libya and then Syria. For Syria, it's still ongoing. But many of these dictators wanted to shut down the social media because it was the way mobilization was done. It was the way information was shared so fast, just like that. And they thought the best way to control the crowd and avoid more trouble was to shut the social media down and keep everyone in darkness. But that was not possible. So the social media, like when you see during this demonstration, this young woman is saying, who is afraid of Twitter? Because they wanted to shut down Twitter. They wanted to shut down Facebook. But, these tools are playing very crucial roles today. And many times, even when we say young people try to create a bubble of an imaginary world around themselves, which is actually detached from reality, sometimes they escape from this bubble and they do the right thing, and it's shown success in these areas of the world to push for democracy, to push for different things that they care about. And I've always been fascinated. Martin Luther King Jr. in Birmingham jail. This is a picture taken from the Library of Congress website. So these are the kind of materials you would find on that website. I think it's in black and white, and I think the kids will get a kick out of it. And it looks so real, like just as if it was taken a few minutes when it was just pushed in and the door shut, and then somebody took this picture. But at that point, you had to write letters to get out to other clergies. But today, people would tweet, they would Facebook and Instagram and everything. I think in a few hours, there would be 1 billion people around the world who would know what happened really and possibly get live updates. But that shows the contrast between the world we live in and the world that we did not live in, which direction is taking now. So for me, I think why I do this and why I think the Library of Congress plays a very crucial role providing all these resources is because really leadership at all levels should be prepared for a world that has shrunk into one village. A problem in any part of the world will affect everyone. if DRC Congo had Ebola and all this other region with Carlton, there might be no production of high definition screen smartphones for a while, because the materials needed to do it won't be there. And so this globalization means we have to be prepared for this kind of thing. So I find the Library of Congress really fascinating, providing all these materials that teachers can use in their lesson plans, and I think everybody else can use, especially if you're looking for credible historical facts or the background of certain things that you care about and want to share with the kids. If I'm not mistaken, this is one of my last slides. And I don't know how I'm doing in time. This is another picture from the library. They're really very interesting resources.